It began with a scream, high-pitched, frightened, and utterly disbelieving. Not from my family or myself, but from a woman on a pink flamingo float juggling a mimosa, just before a curious Angus cow pushed her into the dark water of my cattle pond. Imagine this. Seconds before, that same woman was yelling over a loudhailer promoting brunch to a group of dressed-up HOA attendees, none of whom knew they were even slightly invading private land. She was floundering in cow drool, algae, and pond mud now, frantically attempting to prevent her sundress from turning calf chow. The best thing about it is she still not knew I had unlocked the gate. On aim. Still, how did we get here? Oh, wait. Improves. 2 days before, I saw a queue of strange vehicles lined behind my barn on the ancient path. Initially, I thought someone was lost. Delivery vehicles regularly mix that dirt path with a road. But it was not FedEx here. It resembled a premium automobile parade. I tallied at least 14 nice SUVs and sedans. Attracted by music and splashing, I trailed the sound around the bend and came across what stopped me dead. My livestock pond now served as a reality TV resort. Flimsy animals floated slowly. Sitting on my pier was a phony tiki bar. Also on the bank, rows of white chairs, women in sundresses, and the clear scent of riches passing for rustic. Then arrived Karen, the star of this production. You understood there had to be one. Karen was definitely clear-cut. Oversized sunglasses, a hand-glued copybook, and a voice strong enough to break concrete. Though their area of jurisdiction excluded my land, she had self-appointed herself as the HOA president of the new development over the road. She produced a tight, phony grin for me. Oh, hi. She chipped like we were neighbors chatting over coffee. She pointed to a sign bearing Serenity Springs Bridal Brunch, placed above my real cattle watering hole. Not inquiring. Not authorized. Right then, you may expect me to lose it. I neither. I nodded, because Karen interpreted my quiet as capitulation. It seemed to me a strategy. She gave me a laminated itinerary including yoga in my hayfield, paddle boats, a live harpist. She said, rather wisely, I should be appreciative of the exposure. I left gently and phoned an old acquaintance who happens to be a wedding planner. She laughed so hard I had to keep repeating myself. Still, her guidance? Let play out. Note everything, and when the moment arrives, let the cows speak for themselves. I did. Like Broadway, I watched them get the place ready. Portable Lou Ferry's lights, an arch by the pond. They even experimented with draping my grain silo in cloth, like it were a Pinterest wedding backdrop. My cows looked on, not really interesting. Sunday early, it all came together. Karen started the celebration with a lecture on vision, unity, and community. I just went across and unlocked the pasture gate. Not any theater, just a gradual groan of old hinges, and the serene patience of a man who understands cows have ideal comic timing. Their eyes caught the opening. The food smelled good to them, and down the hill they arrived, fluffy juggernauts on a task. One by one, they waggled toward the pond, prodding floaties, sniffing beverages, and mooing blissfully as anarchy descended. And what lovely anarchy it was. One person yelled when a cow licked her mimosa. One of the steer licked sunscreen from a beach bag, demanding I control my animals. Karen flushed beetroot red. I grinned and told her, in front of everyone, this was my land, my pond, my pigs. She was also invading private space. She reported a cow attack on 911. The constable who showed there tried his best not to laugh. She gave him her clipboard, now drenched from cow-induced splashing, and turned to me asking whether I wanted to press trespassing charges. I answered no. I had better ideas. Karen knew nothing about the kind of anarchy I had planned ahead. She would find out shortly, though. On my daily walk 3 days following the notorious brunch, I noticed something unusual, a drone. Low hovering, running around the meadow in circles, floating around the pond like a camera-equipped curious fly. I raised a shovel to emphasize my point even though I did not knock it out of the sky. Clearly, the drone raced quickly back to the HOA homes. Later in the day, the complaints started to flood in. The new story Karen is telling she even shared drone footage of a bull urinating himself with a dramatic caption. Environmental biohazard in progress, as my cows were now generating noise pollution, earth vibrations, and methane clouds. If it had not become a city inspection, it would have been funny, but I was ready. I phoned Dallas, my cousin living in the county. He showed in carrying a copybook. We handed the inspector a folder full of compliance records, water testing, manure management techniques, you know it, certified farming methods approved by USDA. Dallas used legal jargon like federally protected cattle corridor, and the inspector nodded, snapped some pictures, and left, obviously annoyed at wasting his time. Still lacking, though, Karen was still no thanks. She sharpened her escalation, claimed cows were reducing property values, violating aesthetic integrity, and worst of all, stealing pool floaties. She went door to house in the HOA complex, distributing leaflets for a cow-free zone initiative. Indeed, gravely. And then it dawned on me. I would provide Karen a public narrative if she wanted one. I phoned Ethan, a local news reporter who once came out of a snowbank. I told him a tale about a small-time farmer persecuted for just existing by entitled HOA. Yes, he answered right away. And following that, perfect magic. The next night during prime time, the program Farmer Fights Back. Cows versus Karens ran cheeky, factual, and a touch playful. We included everything, cows being brushed by neighborhood children, the flamingo float, and a run-through of USDA rules by Dallas personally. On the internet, it was embraced. The narrative went online really quickly. Even her own niece made a tick-up proclaiming it the most chaotic and deserved brunch ever. Karen tried to say the tape was doctored. The general public chose their side. And spoiler alert, that was not hers. People appreciate an underdog as, at the end of the day, they are human. They find cows to be lovely. And they truly enjoy seeing a Karen be outwitted by a man with a fence, a strategy, and a herd of quite opinionated animals. Nevertheless, keep in mind, round one was simply the beginning. Karen, she was unsure of what was to follow. Contributions started to flood the little agricultural charity I had mentioned casually during the interview. One local bakery even volunteered to help with an appreciation celebration with a cow motif. That sparked a thought for me. I could as well transform my cow pond into a theater of my own choice if Karen was intending to centralize it as the focal point of a social battlefield. I quickly planned up a community event called Moo at the Moon, a twilight gathering by the pond featuring family-friendly games, cow meet and greets, music, and a couple local food trucks. I invited all, even HOA members. Simple hospitality and hay bales for seating replaced fences and RSVPs. I paid a band to cover country songs, put lights all around the barn, and utilized the money contributed to rent bouncy houses and paint a large wooden sign saying "Cows Welcome." The occasion turned out to be really successful. Children embraced calves. Adolescents snapped pictures of a cow sporting sunglasses, and even the mayor showed up carrying his dog. Karen arrived only well after dark, standing on the edge of the property with her arms folded and a pair of binoculars hanging from her neck. I ignored her, but I made sure the local newspaper captured the happy throng just as a banner proclaiming, "Respect the herd," swung in the breeze overhead. Karen hit once more the following day, this time with a certified letter from a legal company charging me with public disturbance creation. Her complaint claimed that my event disrupted local wildlife, generated more traffic, and diminished the peace in the neighborhood. I sent the letter immediately to Dallas, who submitted it with a complete chronology of events to the State Agricultural Board. 2 days later, Karen got her own letter, not from me, from the state, telling her that any more harassment or interference with an active agricultural site might lead to legal action and large fines. She vanished for a weekly period. She had company when she got back. Equipped with a microphone and camera, she was a podcaster well known for generating local drama. She had to have felt she could turn the narrative around to recover her reputation. Even the podcaster seemed uneasy when I gently laid out the whole chronology, showed the original footage of her trespassing, and played snippets from the aired interview. He shut off the camera, asked a few brief questions, then left without completing the section. Karen stood like a balloon someone had let the air out of. Though I had understated her, I assumed that may be the end of it. Karen was working behind the scenes, silently plotting with one aim in mind, to seize control of the territory adjacent to mine. She was not causing public anarchy. Her idea included brunch and flamingo floats not. It included legal gaps, land rights, and bureaucratic pettiness, so particular it could only come from someone who had previously had a mimosa party in a cow pond. A sharply dressed man in a blazer came on my door exactly at 9 a.m. next morning. He wore a half between smugness and distrust and carried a clip. He identified himself as Charles, from the HOA inspection team. I informed him that HOA jurisdiction had never applied to my land. His answer was a practiced justification of adjacent property standards, impacting communal aesthetics, then a hazy reference to me under preliminary assessment. He was already photographing my barn, water tanks, and, bizarrely, my compost heap before I could inquire what it meant. I finally inquired who had sent him when he took pictures of a cow mid-chew like it was violating security. He tried to sidestep the inquiry, but under some pressure he said it had been Karen. Apparently, Karen had persuaded a number of HOA members that my acreage was an eyesore clearly seen from some of the more modern homes on the hill. She said my cows threatened the peace and health of the town, and the cattle pond was dangerous and inappropriate for cattle. Charles was reminded by me that my cows had been here long before the HOA was ever established. Then he inquired whether I had a livestock permit for public adjacent agricultural activity. I wasn't sure whether Karen had created a whole new rule or whether he was lying. I simply walked him off the grounds instead of debating. I then picked up some calls. Dallas got back that same afternoon, more fired than ever. He had handled actual agricultural conflicts, but the concept of a HOA attempting to oversee our family's cow ranch set off memories. Dallas documented everything and once more checked the entire property. Then, with traditional country pride, he printed a big sign on the Certified Agricultural Biosecurity Zone. Entry without permit is a federal violation, and securely posted it on my gate. He arrived up the following day sporting his official USDA insignia, clearly stating that my pond and cows were off limits. That evening, driven only out of curiosity, I went to my first HOA meeting. Although I didn't live in their development, given their constant meddling, I felt justified in watching. Sitting front and fanning herself with a printed agenda was Karen. Her smile froze the instant she spotted me. She tried to contend that it was a closed session, but Greg, an older board member with a subdued sense of humor, cut her off. I believe he can sit in a chair if you can arrange brunch on his property. The conference began quietly. Talks on mailbox colors, tree cutting, and noise complaints. But the tone changed when Karen stood to introduce fresh business. She started a fervent speech about shielding the HOA from unsightly farmland, calling my cows filthy biological agents and my pond a festering swamp, accusing me of being a rude landowner, and suggesting the HOA pursue legal action to establish a buffer zone with monitoring rights over my property. I hauled out a projector and connected my laptop at that point, standing, grinning, and coolly added, "I have a few slides that might help clear the situation." The room grew dark. The first slideshow showed Karen on a unicorn float in my pond clutching a mimosa. Laughing rang true. Second slide. A broad view of the whole brunch arrangement with a private party, no entry sign. More chuckle. Third slide. A notarized screenshot of my property deed, precisely marked outside HOA territory. Slide 4. Karen zip-tying a notice to my gate announcing her event includes the pond. Silence came next. Greg choked to cover a laugh. "Oh, wow," a second-row woman whispered. I turned off the projector. "This is my ground," I said. "You came onto it without asking, through a party, and today you're trying to control my way of life on it. 20 years ago, I arrived here. 20 months ago, you arrived here. Let us define clearly who is out of line." Trying to switch the subject, Karen struggled with her notes, but the harm had been done. Someone moved to cast a vote on her proposition. One other board member proposed voting to condemn her. Greg then quietly and with finality suggested a vote of no confidence. The space burst in silent whispers. Karen turned around the room, looking for supporters. Even the woman bringing the sweets turned away. The voting turned out not even close. Karen was taken out of her self-appointed post. Greg was appointed temporary chair. The board decided to review and change the bylaws to stop any more overreach onto non-HOA territory. Several neighbors approached me as the gathering drew to a close. One woman brought me a brownie container and stated gently, "I didn't know she never asked." Grinning, I said thanks to her and looked out at the black field beyond the road where the cows softly grazed under the sky. Ultimately, the best approach to stop entitlement is not by means of lawsuits or resentment. It's based on facts, cool resolve, and occasionally, a few cows with great comic timing. I answered. The cows appreciated it and thanked her. Glancing back toward the community center, I got into my pickup. Karen was seated by herself in a folding chair there in the low illumination of the projector screen, still fixated on the frozen picture of herself seated on a unicorn float. At the property, everything was quiet once more. Under the stars, the cows milled gently. I settled on the porch, filled a cup of tea, and watched the moonlight dance across the pond. Not yet, though. I was not done with Karen. She had tried to organize a suburban militia against the life I had spent decades creating, trespassed, lied, and I felt strongly she would be returning. And she would discover more than cows waiting for her the next time she strayed that cue. She would find a rancher who knew every inch of his territory, every legal right under the law, and how to fight back patiently, with evidence, and just enough anarchy to make things interesting. It began with a for sale sign, tiny, understated, and stuck into the ground on the far side of the lot running alongside my fence line. I originally gave it little thought. For years, that strip of ground remained unaltered, only home to scrub, cactus, and a few mesquite trees. I reasoned perhaps the owner had at last chosen to cash out. Then I became aware of something odd, though. The sign omitted to mention the acres. Zoning was not mentioned. It mentioned simply scenic waterfront vistas. On the back of my neck, the hairs got upright. Only one piece of water out here was worth seeing, and it wasn't on land for sale. Mine was it, my livestock pond. A few calls verified my suspicions. Karen had offered to pay above market value in cash for the land weeks ago. She informed the owner she was advocating community harmony and elevating property values, but in truth, she was trying to create an event pavilion, an HOA-owned gathering platform that would allow her offer breakfasts and yoga sessions overlooking my pond without ever setting foot on my land. She had lost every fight, but one land acquisition at a time she was still fighting the war. I contacted Mr. Jameson, the lot owner, a retired hay provider I had long-standing business with. He grabbed on the second ring and laughed before I could even finish. "Son," he added, "you think I would sell her that patch following what I saw on the news? I had been looking forward to your call. You pay $1 and a steak meal for the place." I almost dropped the phone. The very next morning we concluded the sale, after signing the paperwork and handing him a steak. 2 hours later my truck was parked exactly where her observation platform was supposed to be. Legally, permanently. That was my land. Her entire scheme was dead in the water now. That same afternoon, I built a hand-painted wooden sign pointing the HOA line. Private property. Cows might approach without warning. Just a lighter. I included a happy cartoon cow. But Karen saw it as a proclamation of war. She shot back 20-24 hours by erecting a decorative fence exactly along the property boundary. Fake ivy, solar-powered fairy lights, and a painted sign saying "Coming soon." Garden pavilion lined it. She even set up a preview picnic near the fence, vocally sharing her ideas for sunrise yoga, meditation sessions, and pond view poetry readings. I no longer find poetry or meditation objectionable. I wasn't going to sit back, though, while she claimed she had one. I therefore started to get inventive. Local youngsters ran a weekend paintball club. Just a few yards back from the new barrier, entirely on my land, I presented them a free-use field. They erected safety signs, created hay bale bunkers, and arranged brilliantly colored targets. They arrived with their gear every Saturday and Sunday, laughing and hollering as they fired biodegradable, non-toxic paint at wooden cutouts of coyotes and raccoons. The HOA boundary resonated with the sound of gleeful anarchy and compressed air. Of course, Karen spoke with the sheriff. Deputies arrived and shrugged after checking everything, including safety signals, zoning status, distance from the fence. Everything was in line legally. Karen insisted I call it off. I inquired gently, "Would you want cowbells again?" She stomped out, leaving her folding table and picnic blanket like a wrecked ship on a rocky beach behind her. She escalated once more 1 week later, this time alleging my cows were hostile. She manipulated the movies to give the footage of them mooing the impression of them charging her fence. She tagged one video showing a calf stumbling over a log as a rampage incident. She turned in this evidence to the HOA board in hopes of receiving an official warning directed against me. She regretfully found the board stopped playing her games. They had become tired of her continual complaints since she was removed as interim president. One line, lack of HOA jurisdiction confirmed, updated her file. Not one activity to be done. That had no effect on her either. Her next move was exactly what one would find in a poor espionage fiction. She started parking hours at a time close to the property border, seated in her SUV with notepad and binoculars. One of my neighbors emailed me a picture of her bent behind her car, capturing a cow scratching its side on a tree. She uploaded the video online and claimed carelessness had resulted in animal cruelty. She erased the post in 1 hour, since the internet blasted her so fiercely. The young people in the area adored visiting the ranch by now. Their parents trusted me, and the cows had started to draw locals. A family delivered cookies one evening and said, "Thanks for bringing nature back to the neighborhood." That sparked an idea in me. Should Karen wish to discuss scenic views, I would assign the entire community one they could honor. I paid a muralist to create a massive work on the side of my barn facing the HOA. It featured a content cow sporting sunglasses, a pond reflecting moonlight, and a banner saying "Welcome to Mulandia, population, awesome." It was bold, vivid, and understandably, it enraged Karen. Her installation of a speaker on her ornamental fence, playing classical music to soothe the environment, proved the last straw. My cows were inquisitive. They wandered over, began chewing the synthetic ivy, and toppled the speaker. One of them left on her picnic mat a steaming gift. Not even home when it happened. When I got back, Karen was fighting fiercely with 2 youths who had been dragging hay along the fence in order to draw cows. She threatened to phone animal control, law enforcement, the sheriff, even the mayor. She was unaware, though, that the mayor had already visited my ranch, and his Facebook profile picture featured a selfie, including one of my cows. "Ma'am, this isn't a neighborhood issue," officials said after one quick look when they arrived for their last visit. "It is a farm. You are fortunate to be even let to have that fence standing." That evening, I stood against the porch railing sipping tea and listened as the sun fell behind the meadow and the cows gathered once more by the water. I could hear soft classical music floating from her fence far away. It melded gently with the breeze, the rustling grass, and the subdued laughter of teenagers gathering paintball equipment. Alone by the gate, Karen stood with her shadow shaped by flickering fairy lights. She spoke softly instead of screaming. She posed no threat. She was only observing from there. It was peace for a fleeting moment. I asked whether she at last realized she had no authority over this country. She was an outsider attempting to rule something that did not belong to her, regardless of how many walls she erected or rules she twisted. Perhaps she at last realized that all she actually did was welcome the herd in every time she tried to exert her while using manipulation. Cowards will follow where there is obstinate pride. And mine, they understood exactly where they belonged. My conflict with Karen became somewhat of a local legend as summer neared its close. Inquiring about the cows, the paintball club, the painting, or the Mulandia sign, people stopped me in town. Young children dragged their parents to the fence line just for pictures. One even donned a cow for the town costume procession, complete with a cardboard flamingo float fastened on their back. Though Karen had unintentionally made my cattle pond a neighborhood landmark, I had attempted to keep life straightforward on the ranch. But at the time, I was unaware that she had not given up. Not exactly. She had just changed the battleground. She was not only challenging me now, she aimed at the system itself, and her last action would be the most cunning of them. Supporting Karen's cause, homeowners said they simply wanted to reclaim the natural harmony of the area. As I would subsequently learn, though, her actual strategy was far more subtle. Under a little-known rural environmental clause, Karen was advocating reclassification of my cattle pond, not as private property, but rather as a public water feature. Her case is that the pond on my farm clearly affected the nearby neighborhood visually. She said then the neighborhood had a vested stake in how it was accessible, maintained, and used. Should she be successful, I could lose first rights to the pond. It would come under common jurisdiction, maybe including HOA control. I considered it a poor joke when I first learned about it. Then, though, a letter showing a formal zoning hearing set to examine the water supply on my land showed up in my mailbox. Their name for it changed from a livestock pond. They considered it a possible community wetland. I stared in shock. For decades, the pond had been exactly what it was supposed to be, a cattle watering spot. Karen had reinterpreted it as something else, something public adjacent, something she might manage with a mix of legal jargon and focused manipulation. I lost no time at all. Of course, I contacted Dallas, who promptly put me in touch with a land use attorney focused in rural property rights. When the lawyer turned over the hearing notice, he almost started to cough. "This is HOA fantasy," he declared, but he became serious later on. "It's nonsense, but if no one questions it, nonsense is traction." We then had to get to work. We pulled every deed, every zoning map, every aerial photo 30 years ago. We gathered official comments from long-standing neighbors, pictures of the original barbed wire fence line, and inspection records attesting to the pond's use for cattle. I put on my best jeans and a neat button-down shirt the day of the hearing. Calm and ready, I moved under the weight of a thick binder underarm. Already there, Karen was looking like she was going to a garden club benefit. Her hair curled, a silver pin on her lapel, and she exuded an arrogant attitude, thinking the result was already in hand. She gave the performance of a lifetime when it came time to speak. Dramatic pauses, community buzzwords, and a PowerPoint presentation full of cherry-picked images. Cows near the pond, children running past paintball gear, zoomed-in photographs of pond slime, looking far worse than reality. I had no need of a PowerPoint when it was my turn. I possessed evidence. I coolly lay forth the pond's entire history, including its construction decades ago for cattle use. I displayed satellite photos showing the pond exactly inside my property limits. I perused the agriculture code detailing private water use rights for ranches. 3 past owners confirmed the pond's sole agricultural usage by notarized declarations I provided in. At last, I turned over a letter from the USDA confirming the pond's classification as an agricultural water source, not under community control. The board went over the papers. Under his breath, one of the members whistled. Another slumped back on his chair and fixed Karen intently. "Ma'am," he questioned, "do you have any documentation showing that this pond was ever not privately owned or used for anything else than livestock?" Karen sat down after opening her mouth, closed it once more. Not even close was the vote. The pond will remain private agricultural land. The board decided unanimously. They cautioned Karen against trying to reclassify it or risk possible legal repercussions for misusing the zoning system. I nodded politely, thanked them, and headed outdoors into the sun. Karen deviated. She stayed indoors, probably surprised that after all her plotting, it had once more produced nothing. Her last play had not gone through. But I had one last action to do for closure rather than retribution. For a last gathering by the pond, I invited neighbors, zoning authorities, even the mayor. I referred to it Moo Fest. Food trucks, live country music, hay rides, and a cow-themed picture booth with the now iconic inflatable flamingo, safely anchored on land this time, were among the offerings. We even made T-shirts right there. "Pond owner since forever," mine said. Karen did not show, while many of her former HOA friends did. Several of them said they were sorry. Certain admitted they simply wanted quiet and were bored with the drama. One mom told me her son used to be terrified of cows until he began visiting By dusk, the pond reflected the moon like it always did, and string lights gleamed over the property. Only somewhat engaged in the celebrations, the cows sloppily stood by the pond eating grass. Leaning on the fence, I sighed not because I had won, but rather because everything was still. Karen had lost. Once the ground was silent, as it should be, as it always has been. A few weeks later, Karen moved. Her house went up for sale with an advertisement that said, "Peaceful neighborhood with pond views." Though I noted the images deftly cut away the paintball field, the warning sign, and the huge Mulandia mural on my barn. Rumor had it she moved to a gated enclave spread over the county. Strict policies, no animals, no ponds visible. To be honest, I wished her well. If this whole process has taught me anything, it's that you may paint fences, write letters, and change bylaws, but you cannot pretend to be Belongers. Not located here. Not on ground that recalls every boot print, every crop, and every cow that has ever drunk from its pond. I curled up on the porch in my rocking chair, drinking the rest of my tea as MooFest drew to an end and the attendees started to depart. Driven softly in a slow circle, the flamingo floats, faded but still floating, out on the lake. One cow gave it a gentle prod with her snout. It whirled slowly and finally stopped. I let out a smile. Ultimately, the most splashing was not from the cows. It was the folks there to support.